Daniel walked with slow steps through the empty valley. The sun had almost set, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and blue. His ship had broken down miles away, and he had been walking for hours. Dust clung to his boots, and his throat was dry, but his mind stayed focused on one hope: to find someone who could help him. He had been to many strange places before, but this part of the sector felt quiet, almost forgotten. At the edge of the valley, he saw a tall structure made of stone and steel. Its tower stretched upward, and soft light glowed from its windows. Daniel felt relief at the sight. He walked faster, his heart lifting as he neared the gates. The air carried the faint sound of water, and the place seemed alive even in the silence of dusk. He thought maybe it was a fortress or an old estate, but he did not know who lived there. Inside the open courtyard, Daniel stopped. A woman stood near a large piece of broken equipment. She was dressed in fine robes, though her hands were steady on the tools she used. Her hair caught the light, and her eyes, bright and sharp, turned toward him. Daniel saw the effort in her movements as she struggled with the heavy machine. For a moment he hesitated, unsure if he should speak, but then his natural kindness guided him forward. "Do you need help?" he asked. His voice was plain, without thought of titles or fear. The woman looked at him, surprised by his simple question. Most men who saw her reacted with awe or silence, but this stranger spoke as if she were anyone else. She studied him for a moment before giving a small nod. "Yes," she said softly. "It is heavier than I expected." Daniel set his pack on the ground and moved beside her. Together they worked to adjust the bent frame of the device. His hands were firm but careful, and he gave short, clear directions as they lifted and shifted the broken parts. She listened and followed his guidance, and soon the machine rested in a better position. The air filled with the faint hum of power as some of its systems flickered back to life. The woman watched as Daniel wiped the dust from his brow. "You know much about repairs," she said. He gave a small shrug. "I have had to fix many things to survive. Ships, engines, tools, whatever breaks along the way." There was no pride in his words, only truth. She found that unusual. Most people she knew boasted about even the smallest skills. This man did not. He worked as though helping was natural, not something to be praised. For a while, they continued adjusting the equipment. As the sun fully set, the courtyard lights grew brighter. Daniel noticed the beauty of the place. The walls were carved with patterns, and the stone held a history he could not name. The woman seemed to belong here, yet she carried herself with a calm strength that felt different from what he expected of someone living in wealth. When the machine was finally steady, she turned to him again. "You offered to assist without knowing who I am?" she said quietly. "Why?" Daniel smiled faintly. "You looked like you needed help." That was enough. She held his gaze for a moment longer, her expression unreadable. Then she gave a slight smile of her own, one touched with something rare, perhaps curiosity. Daniel could not tell, but he felt that his choice to step forward had changed something important, even if he did not yet know what it was. The night deepened around them, and the stars shone above the tall towers. Daniel gathered his pack, unsure of what would happen next, but he no longer felt as alone as he had hours before. He had met a woman of quiet strength, and though he did not know her name or her station, he sensed that his path had crossed with hers for a reason that would unfold in time. The night was calm, and the stars glowed above the tall towers of the estate. Daniel followed the woman as she led him through the courtyard. The broken machine now hummed faintly behind them, a sign that their work had not been in vain. He did not ask her name, and she did not offer it. There was a quiet understanding between them that words did not need to fill. They walked into a wide hall lit by golden lamps. The walls were lined with tapestries and carvings that told stories of old battles, journeys, and victories. Daniel felt small in such a place, yet he kept his composure. His eyes moved from one detail to another, impressed by the beauty, but not overcome by it. He thought of the many stations and colonies he had seen, and none had ever looked like this. The woman stopped by a long table where a jug of water rested. She poured him a cup and handed it to him. He accepted it with a nod, grateful as the cool water touched his dry throat. For the first time that day, he felt refreshed. She watched him quietly, studying the way he carried himself. "You have traveled far," she said at last. Daniel nodded. "My ship broke down. I had no choice but to walk." I did not expect to find a place like this." "You speak as if you have seen much," she said, her tone curious. "I have seen many places," he replied, "but each one is different. Some are rich, some are poor. Some are filled with people. Others stand in silence. This one feels alive even in the stillness." Her lips curved into a small smile at his words. She found his view honest. Most visitors spoke in grand tones to impress her, but Daniel's way was plain and clear. He seemed to see the world without masks or shadows. They sat at the table for a while. Daniel spoke of his travels, of broken ships patched together with his hands, of storms that swept across barren lands, and of quiet nights spent under strange skies. She listened without interrupting, her eyes fixed on him. He did not boast, nor did he hide the hardships. His voice carried the weight of someone who had lived through struggle, but had not been broken by it. At one point, he looked at her directly and asked, "What about you? Do you live here alone?" For a moment, she seemed taken aback. Few dared to question her, yet this man asked without hesitation. She gave a soft laugh, one that sounded rare even to her own ears. "No, not alone," she answered. "There are many who serve here, but tonight it seems quieter than usual." Daniel nodded, accepting her answer without pressing for more. He respected her choice of silence, just as she respected his honesty. There was no need for titles or explanations. In that hall, they were simply two people sharing words in the calm of night. After some time, she rose and guided him to a chamber where he could rest. The room was simple, yet elegant, with clean sheets and a soft lamp glowing near the bed. Daniel placed his pack in the corner and turned back to her. "Thank you," he said. "I did not expect such kindness." She met his gaze. "You offered help without knowing me? That is not common. It is fair that I offer the same." Their eyes held for a moment longer before she turned and left the room. Daniel lay down, his body heavy from the long journey, but his mind still active. He thought of the woman he had met, her strength, and the quiet way she carried herself. He felt there was more to her than she had shown, yet he did not feel the need to solve the mystery at once. As he drifted into sleep, Daniel wondered what tomorrow would bring. He had arrived at this place by chance, yet it no longer felt like chance. Something about this meeting carried weight, as if it was meant to happen. He did not know who she truly was, but he knew that his path had crossed with hers for a reason that time would reveal. The morning light filled the estate as Daniel woke from a deep rest. The room was quiet and the air smelled of fresh bread and herbs. He stretched and stepped out into the corridor. Guards in fine uniforms stood at certain points, watching him with sharp eyes but without speaking. Daniel nodded to them and moved toward the hall where he had spoken with the woman the night before. She was already there, standing near the window where the sun streamed in. Her robe shimmered faintly in the light, and her posture carried both calm and strength. Daniel greeted her politely, and she turned toward him with the same quiet smile she had given before. Breakfast was set on the table, and they sat together. Servants moved around them, placing dishes and filling cups, yet Daniel's focus stayed on her. He was curious about her, but still did not press for answers. As they ate, she asked him more about his journeys. Daniel spoke of the colonies that struggled with little food, of miners who worked with worn tools, and of merchants who traded under harsh laws. His stories painted a picture of hardship, but also of people who endured. She listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. He noticed that she asked questions that showed she cared about the lives of those he described. At last, Daniel grew bold enough to ask, "And you? What role do you hold in this place? The guards, the servants, the walls, they all speak of someone important." The woman did not answer at once. Instead, she set her cup down and looked at him with clear eyes. "I am the one they serve," she said. "This estate, these lands, and far beyond them, are under my rule. I am Queen Eleanor." The truth struck him with weight. He had worked beside her hands, spoken with her as an equal, and never guessed she was the ruler of vast wealth and power. He recalled his simple question, "Do you need help?" and felt almost foolish. Yet when he looked at her again, she was watching him not with pride but with calm patience. "You are surprised," she said softly. "I am," Daniel admitted. "I spoke to you as though you were anyone else." "That is why I find your company refreshing," Eleanor replied. "Most bow before me, or they speak only to gain favor. You offered to assist without knowing me. That is rare." Daniel looked at her with steady eyes. "When I saw you struggling, I only saw someone who needed a hand, nothing more." For the first time, Eleanor's smile grew warmer. She seemed relieved to hear those words. Around them, the servants carried on their tasks, but there was a quiet sense that something had shifted in that hall. The queen had revealed herself, and Daniel had not changed his manner. He remained the same man, plain and honest. Later that day, Daniel walked through the gardens with her. The paths were lined with flowers, and fountains sang with clear water. She spoke to him of the burdens of rule, the endless demands, the weight of decisions, and the greed of nobles who sought her favor. Daniel listened without judgment. He offered no grand advice, only simple truths from his own life. "Sometimes the smallest act of fairness means more than gold," he said. She nodded, knowing his words carried wisdom born from real struggle. As they walked, people bowed to her, yet she barely seemed to notice. Instead, she kept her gaze on Daniel, testing his reactions. Unlike the others, he did not bow or flatter. He treated her with the same respect he gave anyone, and that respect was honest. By evening, word had spread through the estate that a stranger had spoken with the queen as if she were an equal. Some servants whispered that it was bold, others feared it was dangerous, yet Eleanor herself did not silence him. Instead, she welcomed his presence. Daniel sensed that his life had changed, though he was not sure how. He had come here by chance, yet now he stood in the trust of the most powerful woman he had ever met. That night, as the stars lit the sky once more, Daniel sat alone in his chamber. His mind turned over the events of the day. He had met a queen, worked at her side, and spoken freely to her. He wondered what path lay ahead. But one thought stayed clear above all. He would remain true to himself, no matter what wealth or power surrounded him. The days passed, and Daniel's presence in the estate became known to more people. The guards spoke of him with caution. The servants whispered his name, and the nobles who visited Queen Eleanor began to notice him. Some thought he was only a traveler who had stumbled into fortune, while others suspected there was more to him. He moved quietly, helping where he could, and speaking to the queen as he always had, with honesty. One evening, a gathering was held in the grand hall. Nobles dressed in fine clothes filled the room, their voices rising as they spoke of trade, land, and power. Daniel stood near the edge, watching the flow of the crowd. Eleanor sat on her high seat, listening with calm patience as petitioners asked for favors. Daniel noticed how many of them spoke not with respect but with hunger. Their words were polished, but their eyes revealed greed. When the gathering ended, Eleanor invited Daniel to walk with her in the quiet corridors. She spoke of the endless demands placed upon her and how difficult it was to find someone who acted without hidden purpose. Daniel listened, his steps steady beside hers. "Most of them see only what they can gain," she said. "It is rare to find one who asks for nothing." The queen's trust in Daniel grew, but not all were pleased by it. Among the nobles was Lord Harrington, a man known for his ambition. He had long sought greater influence in Eleanor's court. When he saw how freely Daniel spoke to her, he grew envious, began to spread quiet words among the others, claiming Daniel sought to rise above his station by winning the queen's favor. Soon whispers turned to offers. One afternoon, as Daniel walked through the gardens, a finely dressed noble approached him. The man smiled, but his eyes were sharp. "You are close to the queen," he said. "If you were to share her plans with me, I could reward you well. Gold, land, anything you desire." Daniel's face remained calm. "I offered to help her because it was right. I do not need your gold." The noble frowned, his smile fading. "Think carefully. Refuse me, and others may not be so polite." But Daniel only turned and walked away. His heart was firm. He would not betray Eleanor, no matter the promises or threats. Still, he knew the dangers were growing. His choice to stand by her side placed him in the path of those who wished her harm. That night, a shadow crept through the estate. A plan had been set to end Eleanor's life. A servant, loyal to the nobles, slipped poison into her drink. Daniel, passing by the hall, noticed the servant's hurried steps and uneasy glance. His travels had taught him to trust such signs. He entered the hall and saw the cup left on the table. Something in its scent struck him as wrong. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and knocked the cup from the queen's hand before she could drink. The liquid spilled across the floor. Shock filled the room. Guards rushed in, and the guilty servant was seized. Under questioning, the truth came out. The plot had been born from jealous nobles who feared Daniel's bond with Eleanor. Eleanor looked at Daniel with steady eyes. "You saved me," she said, her voice low but filled with meaning. Daniel shook his head. "I only did what anyone should do. I could not stand by and watch harm come to you," but Eleanor knew the truth. Many would have stayed silent or worse, joined the plot. But Daniel had chosen loyalty when it mattered most. His courage had preserved her life. The news of the attempt spread quickly. Some nobles fled in fear of being discovered, while others tried to distance themselves from the plot. Eleanor acted with strength, removing those who had betrayed her and restoring order to her court. Through it all, Daniel stayed at her side, asking for nothing in return. As the night ended, Eleanor stood before him. "Your loyalty has been tested," she said, "and you have proven true. I will not forget this." Daniel bowed his head slightly, not as a subject, but as a man showing respect. "I did what I had to do." In that moment, both of them understood that their bond had grown deeper. Daniel was no longer just a traveler who had offered help by chance. He had become someone the Queen could trust with her life. The days after the attempt on Queen Eleanor's life were filled with unrest. The court still buzzed with whispers, and the nobles, who had once spoken with pride, now kept their voices low. Daniel remained calm through it all, moved as he always did, steady and unshaken, but the weight of what had happened stayed with him. He had not come seeking power, yet power seemed to circle around him because of his loyalty. Eleanor noticed this as well. She called for him often, not to give commands, but to speak with him. They walked the halls together, ate at the same table, and spoke late into the evening. She told him of her burdens, the decisions that shaped the lives of millions, the endless pressure of wealth and rule. Daniel listened, as he always had, not as a subject but as a friend. She valued that more than she could put into words. One afternoon, Eleanor led him to a chamber few ever entered. The doors opened to reveal a room filled with treasures, gold stacked high, jewels that glowed like fire, and records of lands and fleets that stretched farther than the eye could imagine. Daniel paused, struck by the sight. He had heard of riches in his travels, but never had he seen such wealth gathered in one place. "This is mine," Eleanor said quietly. "The nobles bowed because of it. The worlds obey because of it. And yet it brings me a little peace. Tell me, Daniel, what do you see here?" Daniel stepped forward and studied the room, did not reach for the gold or jewels. He only shook his head slowly. "I see things that can be lost," he said. "Treasure, land, ships, all of it can vanish in time. What matters is what you choose to do with it." Eleanor looked at him, searching his face for signs of envy or greed. She found none. His words carried no hunger, only truth. For a long moment, the Queen was silent. Then she said, "Most would fall to their knees in this room, begging for a share." "You look at it as if it is nothing." Daniel met her gaze. "It is not nothing. It can change lives if used with wisdom. But I do not need it. What I offered you that first night was help, not for reward, but because it was right." Eleanor felt something stir within her that no gold could bring. She closed the doors to the chamber and walked with him back into the light. For the first time in many years, she felt free of the weight that treasure placed on her shoulders. In the days that followed, she called Daniel to stand beside her in council. When nobles questioned his presence, she silenced them with a glance. He did not sit as a ruler, but his voice was heard, spoke plainly, reminding them that power meant little without fairness. Some nobles scoffed, but others listened, for they knew the Queen valued his counsel. Outside the court, word spread among the people. They heard of the stranger who had stood against poison, who had spoken to the Queen without fear, who had not bent before riches. To them, Daniel became a symbol of honesty and courage. Farmers, traders, and soldiers alike spoke his name with respect. One evening, as the sun sank and painted the sky in red and gold, Eleanor and Daniel stood on the balcony of the high tower. The land stretched wide before them, shining under the last light of day. Eleanor turned to him and said, "You have changed much here. You ask for nothing, yet you give more than those who come seeking everything." Daniel looked out across the horizon. "I only gave what I could. The rest was your choice. You are the one who holds the power to shape these lands." She studied him for a long moment. "Then let us shape them together," she said. "Not as queen and subject, but as companions." Daniel's face softened with a rare smile. He did not need to bow or speak grand words. His answer was clear in his steady eyes. From that day forward, Daniel walked at Eleanor's side, not as a servant and not as a noble, but as someone the queen trusted above all others. Together, they guided the realm with wisdom and strength. Their story spread through the stars, told and retold, as a tale of how a single act of offering help, given without thought of gain, changed the fate of a queen and the future of a galaxy.